Hello, I'm Leo Whiteside. We're going to be talking about melatonin. Melatonin is generally thought of as a sleep aid, and it certainly is that. It is involved in the sleep-wake cycle, and it's part of the metabolic mechanism of the brain circuitry that produces sleep. But the melatonin that the pineal gland produces and that interacts with our sleep mechanism is less than 5% of the melatonin that the body produces and uses all day and all night. So melatonin is much more than a sleep aid. And that is what we're going to talk about in this presentation. Melatonin is an ancient molecule that has been part of our life since our ancestors were one-cell organisms 2.5 to 3 billion years ago. This remarkable substance saved us from being overwhelmed by oxygen and oxidative byproducts of metabolism during the time that the great oxygenation occurred, when photosynthesis occurred and the atmosphere was filled with oxygen. The unicellular organisms that had the ancient molecule of melatonin in their metabolism already, or else were able to bring the oxygen-utilizing bacteria on board into their own cytoplasm, were the only ones that survived. And melatonin is still responsible for keeping us alive and vigorous. The mitochondria in our cells are the descendants of these bacteria that were taken on board in the early stages of the great oxygenation. And they are loaded with melatonin, and it is the consummate antioxidant, still rescuing us day and night from our own oxidative metabolism. Melatonin is also intimately involved in metabolism and function of enzymes throughout the mitochondria and in the cytosol of every cell in the body. And it has great potential for preventing and treating illness. One of the most important issues that we must address is the source of this melatonin. The issue here is whether we can increase mitochondrial melatonin with supplementation. Does the melatonin that we take as a supplement actually get to the mitochondria and do the same thing? Recent investigations by Russell Ryder and many others have shown that melatonin made within the mitochondria does not leave. This indicates that the mitochondrial melatonin does not perform any general function as a hormone, such as the sleep-wake cycle would require, and explains why the pineal gland is necessary for this function, and it further explains why melatonin supplementation is important for sleep later in life when the pineal gland decreases its function and finally stops producing melatonin. The other important question here is whether exogenous melatonin, such as from supplements, can enter the cells and the mitochondria to aid in their function. The evidence is that the externally supplied melatonin from supplements definitely does enter the cellular structure, including the mitochondria, and does function as the locally produced melatonin does. This strongly suggests that supplemental melatonin can achieve similar effects as the melatonin produced locally by the cellular structures, including the mitochondria. And this will bring us up to the question about dosage and safety of higher doses of melatonin that would supply these metabolic needs as aging occurs and local production diminishes. Just naming its effective actions throughout our bodies requires quite a list, and melatonin's effects are far from fully understood. Now, there's been a massive amount of research recently in the last 5 years or so that shows us a lot, but it also shows us how much we have to learn. Now, here we will talk about some of these in enough detail to be interesting, but clearly there is a lifetime of study before us here. Now, let's start with insulin metabolism. It is very central to our health and well-being. Melatonin is involved with the beta cells of the pancreas, making them more sensitive to blood glucose changes. Over the long haul, melatonin decreases the hemoglobin A1C level in patients who take it on a regular basis, and it increases peripheral tissue insulin sensitivity and protects against oxidative damage. In addition to combating reactive oxygen species, melatonin downregulates inflammatory cytokines, which leads to decreases in insulin resistance and thus helps prevent type 2 diabetes or can treat that disease if it has already occurred. There is certainly enough information for me to encourage using melatonin to prevent and treat this disease. Melatonin performs similarly to calorie restriction and is not exactly a caloric restriction mimetic such as metformin and glucosamine, but it's close in that it activates the AMPK metabolic pathway, and this diminishes fat storage. These effects on AMPK also affect longevity. The lifestyle and metabolic changes that increase the AMPK pathway of our metabolic control of energy generation and usage also increase lifespan and also increase vigor in old age. Melatonin acts in a similar way when it stimulates production of brown adipose tissue. And it does this in a dose-dependent manner, leading to utilization of fat stores and increasing energy utilization for heat generation. This means that melatonin is helpful in preventing fat storage, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. Now, melatonin is anabolic in its effect on muscle. That is, it increases the size and strength of muscles without additional exercise. And it diminishes visceral fat deposition in farm animals. Now, the type of fat that directly causes type 2 diabetes and releases cytokines causing inflammatory disease. This effect is dose dependent, up to a dose of 5 milligrams per kilogram per day in these larger animals, and this is somewhat suggestive for human doses. Melatonin's effect on muscle tissue is not just increasing growth, it also acts to combat obesity through its effect on skeletal muscle's role in heat generation, body temperature, and fat utilization. This is called skeletal non-shivering thermogenesis. It acts through sarcolipin and some other enzymatic mechanisms to short-circuit muscle metabolism and thus generate heat and metabolize fat tissue. In this way, it is anti-diabetic and effective for weight control again. Brown adipose tissue is another mechanism that the body uses for thermogenesis, and melatonin is intimately involved in this as well. This has been found to be dose-dependent up to 10 milligrams per kilogram. As a weight control substance, melatonin has a dose response at high, non-physiological doses, and that will tell us something about how to dose ourselves when we use our daily dose of melatonin. Heat and cold resistance is important for agriculture in agricultural crops, and also in meat production. And melatonin is in early use for crops that require protection from either heat or cold, and also is being considered for meat production. Now, in meat production, it's not currently being actively employed, but it certainly is being investigated in livestock. It effectively increases lean meat growth while decreasing organ fat deposition. This is also dose dependent, and this information is going to help us make decisions about what sort of dose to use for ourselves in terms of controlling our own weight, strength, health, wellness, fat deposition, and maybe even treating disease. I think we're tending toward the higher doses when we start looking at the doses that are used in agriculture. The microbiome is very important in our strength and health. By microbiome, I mean the bacteria in your gastrointestinal system. And it turns out that microbiome modulation by melatonin is a very important part of the way it functions. Microbiome modulation was found to improve neurological function in type 2 diabetes rodent models, that is in the experimental laboratory, and also the obesity microbiome is modified in response to melatonin treatment, leading to development of a microbiome that is more nearly characteristic of thin specimens. So that transposition of this microbiome to the obese specimens led to weight loss. And not only weight loss, but also recovery of insulin sensitivity. Similar microbiome changes were produced when diabetic, obese, Alzheimer's model laboratory rats were treated with melatonin. The microbiome improved and the neurological characteristics were restored toward normal. So it appears that many of the effects of melatonin are achieved through modulation of the microbiome. This is another field of endeavor that we're just now getting into, and we'll know a lot more about this in the next 5 to 10 years. Now let's briefly talk about longevity. Longevity is affected by several different metabolic pathways. At higher doses, up to 40 milligrams per kilogram, melatonin was found to increase telomere length and protect animals from aging stress, whereas lower doses did not produce this effect. Melatonin's effects on steering metabolism toward the AMPK route is probably pro-longevity as well. Likewise, the effects on mitochondrial health during ischemia and reperfusion suggest an effect on longevity. There are many factors involved in longevity, and the sirtuin enzymes that stabilize and protect DNA are also used by melatonin as it performs its effects on metabolism. Generally, it is considered that factors that promote activities of the sirtuin enzyme systems promote health in later life by preserving our DNA information and mechanism. Now, cancer is another factor that we're looking at in terms of melatonin. Cancer is currently being treated by using melatonin to promote sleep in patients with terminal cancer, but it also is improving response to chemotherapeutic drugs while protecting the cellular structure from adverse chemotherapeutic effects. Cancer patients have been found to survive longer if they are protected by melatonin from the toxic effects of their chemotherapy drugs. However, this effect may also be due to the direct effect of melatonin on the cancer cells themselves. Probably one of the most important anti-cancer effects of melatonin is its effects on the mitochondria, steering respiratory metabolism through the electron transfer chain and away from the glycolytic pathway used by cancer cells. It has been found to convert cancer cells actually back into normal tissue cells when administered in high doses. But as the mitochondria age and lose their genetic information, melatonin is even more important to help rejuvenate the mitochondria and promote mitochondrial fusion and survival instead of mitochondrial breakdown. However, production of melatonin decreases as aging occurs. This is evident in the sleep-wake cycle due to the loss of melatonin from the pineal gland. But it is also evident in the loss of melatonin effect on our body in general, in its energy production, strength, and vigor as aging occurs. Now, we are fortunate to have melatonin as an abundant, available, and affordable supplement that can provide protection from many of the devastating aspects of aging and possibly extend healthy lifespan. Dosing of melatonin is likely to be a crucial issue. Most of the metabolic and cancer studies have been done in a range of 5 to 10 milligrams per kilogram, but there are studies on cancer patients that involve doses of more than 1 gram daily. The adverse events have been minimal in these studies, and they have been things like drowsiness, dreams, headaches, and no severe adverse events have been reported, ever. This dosage range is feasible for daily human use as well. Experts on melatonin are now recommending human doses over 100 milligrams daily, and the trend is definitely in that direction. As time passes, we will know more about melatonin, but for now it seems clear that the metabolic advantages for strength, health, and wellness are well established, and that we can be assured that we are following a safe and effective program. I hope this information on melatonin has been helpful to you, at least to get you started studying this subject. I realize it's a huge subject and I could only put together little bits and pieces to bring something together to catch your interest. If you're interested in it, please look at my other presentations on melatonin. There'll be more to come. And in the meantime, give me a thumbs up if you like it, and instructive comments if you don't like it. Your comments would be very helpful. And if you like this sort of thing, there'll be more. Subscribe, and I'll do my best for you.